Hello,
Hello.
I'm Blake Cohen.
Hello, Blake.
How are you, Aunt Ida?
I'm fine, honey. And you? How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
I'm here with my Aunt Ida Strauss. It is October 20th, 2009. Ida is
Yes.
my my father's mother's sister, my grandmother Marie's sister. And I'm going to ask her a few questions, and I hope to find out a little bit about her life and my family's life here in Denver, and also about my great-grandparents and what their lives were like in Europe, and how they came to the United States, and how they came to Denver. So, on that note, Aunt Ida, if you could tell me just a little bit about the circumstances of your birth, when you were born, where you were born.
I shall tell you what I know, of course,
Okay.
because I'm sure that a lot took place in my parents' life that was before I was born, and I'm not aware of most of it. But from what my dad and mother told me, and what I've witnessed myself since I'm born, I can help you with that, Blake.
Good.
Yes.
So where were you born?
Denver, Colorado, right here. We, the three of us, the three younger ones were born here. Marie, who was the youngest, and then and I'm a year and a half older than Marie. And then I had a sister, Min, who was a year and a half older than I am. So, and they're both, unfortunately, they're both gone. And I'm still here, and I'm kind of glad that I can be here for you, Blake, and answer the things you want to know. I can tell you what I know.
Me too. I'm very glad.
Okay.
Were you born in the hospital here in Denver?
As a matter of fact, I was not. I was born at home, and of course a midwife delivered, didn't really even have to deliver me. That is a most peculiar story also. My mother used to tell me that I was the easiest one born. She said when she got her pain or whatever, or the water broke, I'm not sure which came first, it had to have been one or the other. She said, and at that time they all had, that many years ago, they had these feather beds, feather quilts, feather everything was way up off the floor. And she said she lifted her leg to get into bed, and I fell out. So that was her easiest birth. And of course, I don't know about the other. I know we were all born at home.
All born at home?
At that time, yes. Now, the doctor was called, but I guess my mother knew I was going to come a little early, so she sent for the midwife, and of course my dad had called for the doctor, so he came. But when he came, I was already there, so he just took a little information and left.
Do you know who the midwife was?
So naturally, he didn't ask too many questions, and we had a lot of trouble finding our birth certificates, all of us, all three of us. Apparently, the doctors just put whatever, they asked us our name, I was down as baby Rosen. Our name was Rosenberg. And Marie was down as Mary, but her name was Marie. And I think Min was the only one that was down correct. Her name was Minnie. Anyhow, so much for that. What else do you want to know?
You had mentioned before, last time I was here, that you had tracked down all the birth certificates. Why were you interested in finding them?
I didn't hear you.
Oh, last time I was here,
Yes.
you mentioned that you tracked down all the birth certificates for you and Marie and Minnie.
Yes.
And I was wondering why you were interested in finding them.
As a matter of fact, if I told you that, that's not exactly true, Blake.
Okay.
Min is the one that found her birth certificate. And she told me that she had finally found her. She had gone to the Bureau of Vital Statistics 100 times and looked under all kinds of different names because she knew that there was a certificate, but she did not know under what name. So, but she finally found it, and I don't remember exactly what she said at the time, but she said, Ida, if you want to find your certificate, you go back and look under several different names because it's not under Rosenberg. So naturally, I looked under shorter, whatever. I eventually found it under Rosen, and it said baby Rosen.
Yeah.
But I knew it was mine because it was 1915 was when I was born. Marie was born in 1917, a year and a half after I was born. It sounds like 2 years from 15 to 17, but it wasn't. It came out with month-wise that it was a year and a half, 18 months after I was born. She was born. So that's the story, and that's how we found. And of course, then I did find Marie's. When I knew mine was there, I looked for Marie's, and that's when I saw there was a Mary, and I knew that had to be Marie because the date was correct when she was born.
You mentioned that you, Marie, and Minnie were born in Denver.
Yes.
Did you have other siblings, and where were they born?
Where in Denver?
Oh, no, where were your other siblings born?
Oh, they were born in Russia.
Okay.
Yes. They were born in Russia. My oldest sister, and there was a boy born after my oldest sister. He passed away when he was 16 months old with spinal meningitis. And then Leah was born. So there was, I think, 8 years difference between Fanny and Leah. And they were born in Russia, and there was quite a few years difference between, well, not as much naturally between Leah and Min as there was between Fanny and the three of us. As a matter of fact, I was, I think, 2 or 3 years old when Fanny got married. And
Leah was the oldest. Is that correct?
no, Fanny
Fanny's
was the oldest.
Okay.
No, Leah, then Min, then me, then Marie. That's how it worked.
Marie was the baby.
And I don't know, what else do you want to know?
I'm wondering if you know what the name of the town in Russia.
Well, I do. Now, I don't, it was spelled entirely different than it was pronounced. Uh, and I'm not sure, as a matter of fact, I'm almost positive it does not exist any longer. Uh, because things have changed a lot. But I do know that it had to be on the Polish-Russian border, because every time there was a war, if Russia won, it was Russia. If Poland won, it was Poland. And it was called, a small town was called Osrian. And the only way I think it would be spelled in English would be O-Z-R, either O-N or I-O-N, Osrian. Also, it was also, I think the state was pronounced, that was the city, and the state was pronounced Milnowitz. I think that would be spelled Milnowitz. That's as near as I can come to the way it would be spelled in English. I actually had envelopes with the proper address in Russia, because my dad used to send money all the time. And I kept one of those envelopes for many, many, many years. I've looked for it recently. I don't have it. So I don't know what happened to it. I do have his record when he was in the Russian-Japanese War. And I do have that record. I do know what he did when he was in the war. Many very interesting things, actually, that my dad used to tell me. I guess you might say I was his son, because I was with him a lot. He was in the wholesale and retail mercantile business, which consisted of delicatessens, all kinds, smoked fishes, independent halva company, the kosher star, salamis, bolognas, and things of that kind. As a matter of fact, there were only two in business in Denver at the time of the same business, same kind of business, and that was Shachat and my dad. And my dad actually worked, when he first came to this country, he told me he was an iron worker. At the time, I was a small child. I didn't understand what an iron worker was. But since I've discovered that he actually was up building, they were building homes, and he was actually up in what would you call them then, in the beams or whatever. And then he went to work for Shachat, and these people that my dad was representing came to Denver and asked him to represent them and open his business, and they would help him, and that's what happened. And so from then on, he was in that wholesale mercantile, and I used to ride in the truck with him to make deliveries, and that's when he told me a lot of the past, actually, of when he was in the service and all about it. Now, my dad was strawberry blonde, blue-eyed, he did not look Jewish. And at that time, you know how the Jews were treated in Russia. It was a very sad, sad time. But when he was inducted into the service, to this day, I don't know if they knew he was Jewish or not, because he didn't look it. And they said to him, well, you're going to play the trumpet. And he said, well, I'm not a musician. I don't play the trumpet. And they said, we'll teach you. And they did. And he was in the bands. And not only was he in the band, after he was in the service 8 years, unfortunately. So not only they taught him to play the trumpet, but at one time he was in charge of going to Moscow and buying the musical instruments for all the bands. Nevertheless, when the war was over and he was free to come home, he couldn't wait to leave to come to this country. His brother-in-law, my mother's brother, was here. And and he was in Denver. And at that time, they used to send people that had tuberculosis. They would send them to Denver for some reason. They thought the climate was good for tuberculosis. Of course, they found out since it was not, because they used to keep them in the sun, and the sun spread the germ. But anyhow, at that time, they did not know that. And so my father, when he was ready to come to this country, naturally he came to Denver where his brother-in-law was, because his wife had tuberculosis and she was sent here. And then I think it was something like 8 months later, he sent for my mother and my sister Fanny and my sister Leah. And they came to Denver, of course, and we remained here and lived here the rest of our lives. My dad told me a story about when he was in the service, which to this day made a believer out of me. I really believe in God strongly. When things got pretty tough between the Russians and the Japanese, my father suddenly is no longer a trumpeter. He is a courier. He was not allowed to go horseback because they would hear the horse's hoofs. So they were not allowed to naturally go any other way. So they hiked, they walked all the way to
I can't answer that.
Would you like to answer that?
Huh?
Would you like to answer that, or don't worry about it?
Did you turn it off?
Yeah. All right, you were talking about when your father was a courier,
Yes.
for the Russian army.
And another soldier were given messages to take to the front. And as I said, they were not allowed to go any other way but to walk. And so, of course, they did. And they had walked for miles and miles, and they were exhausted. And it was dusk, so they decided they'd lie down and try to sleep for an hour or two. So they lie down by a haystack. And when it started to get light, my dad woke up and called to the soldier that was with him, and he never answered. So he shook him to get him up, and he didn't get up. So he looked at him and he saw he was bloody. He was dead. A bullet had gone through my dad's bridge of the nose into this and killed the soldier next to him. My father then realized he too was bloody from his nose, and but that healed, but it did leave a scar, and that's how I found out what had happened. I asked him once what the scar was.
Mm.
Is it still on?
No,
Okay.
it was a yellow book, Mother. I just erased it. Yellow book.
Oh, I don't know.
And Dr. Kabaska said your test was fine.
Thank you very much.
What was your father's name?
My father's name, well, in Russia, naturally, it was Shmuel. Name was actually Shister. Shister, I believe.
That was his first name? His given name?
Shister was the last name.
Oh.
Shmuel was the first name. My mother's name was Surah Rell, R-E-L-L. Actually, it was Rayer, R-A-Y-E-R, but we brought her nephews over here during the Holocaust, and they changed it to Rell, so we've always referred to it as Rell, but it was R-A-Y-E-R, Rayer,
And
my mother's name. When actually, when she came over, Surah became Sarah, and my dad's name Samuel, and how he got the name Rosenberg is when they were coming through Ellis Island, and he was asked his name, and he said Shmuel Shister, and they said, how do you spell it? Well, my dad didn't speak English, so he didn't know how to spell it in English, and doing it in Hebrew is not going to help the man at Ellis Island. So the man in front of him said his name was Rosenberg. So when the gentleman who was asking my dad all these questions and didn't know how to spell it, said to him, well, Mr. Shister, your name is Rosenberg. And from then on, that's what it was. He made out his papers with the name Rosenberg. And of course, my dad took the name Samuel for Shmuel, which was the proper way. Well, that's how that came about. What else do you want to know, Blake?
Was Shmuel Shister or Sam Rosenberg, was he from Osrion as well?
He was from Osrion. My mother was not. My mother was from another small town, and it was called, oh, my goodness, I'm sorry, I don't remember that, but it'll come to me when you don't want it, I guess. But it was,
well,
I should remember.
that's fine.
She used to always talk about the rabbi from that town, but how she met my dad. Her mother passed away when she was a very young child. She was actually, I think, I don't know, she must have been a teenager already, but a young teenager. And my dad remarried, and naturally the stepmother wasn't very nice to her. She mistreated her, as a matter of fact.
Mother, did she come from a town called Minsk? Minsk?
No,
Minsk?
no. No, Loitsk. Thank you, Sherry. You brought that up. Loitsk was the name of the town my mother came from.
Was that in Milnowitz as well?
I believe it was. I'm not sure of that, but I think it was.
So
And-
Sura's mother passed away when she was young. Your mother's mother passed away when she was
Yes,
young.
when she-
And her father remarried.
Yes, and her father remarried and married this woman who naturally was not nice to a stepdaughter, was a stepdaughter. So her aunt, my mother's aunt, owned an inn. I don't know which town that was in, but she owned an inn where people stayed like a hotel.
It was like a
Stayed
bed and
overnight
breakfast.
and had food. And unfortunately, this was an aunt of my mother's. She treated her like a maid. She worked her to death. So my dad was on his way on business. He was going somewhere, and he stopped at the inn and met my mother. And that's he fell in love, and of course he kept coming back until she married him.
Nice, persistent.
Yes, that's an interesting story.
If it's all right, I'd like to kind of focus on your father for a little bit.
My dad?
Yeah, and learn a little bit more about his life and where and when he was born and what he did for a living.
Well, I really, he did several things, I think. And his father was what they called, I'm trying to think of the name for that now, but it was like a pharmacist. He used to make medicines and travel all the little towns. But my dad did not do that. I don't know what he was doing at the time. But they also had, and I think that's what my father was running and doing at the time, was they made for roofs, shingles. They manufactured shingles. And that's, I knew that that's what he was doing. And actually, he never told me that. But there is a gentleman here now who came from the same town. And he's in the cleaning business. And he told me that that's what my family did there. They made shingles, manufactured shingles for roofs. So that's how I knew that. My dad never discussed what he did for a living. He told me about his, you know, the time he was in the Army and things like that, and what he did here after he got here. But he did not discuss what he did there, and I don't know why, but I've never asked him. I used to ask him questions, and I don't know why. Now I discovered this, and I never knew this either until one day. As I told you, I was my dad's little boy, and he used to go down on Market Street where they had all the fruits and vegetables, and he used to go down and buy all the fruits and vegetables for my mother, and for the neighbors as well. It was during the Depression, which it seems we're going through again. But at the time, I went with him, and I used to sit in the truck while he went and did the shopping for whatever, because there was so much going on there and so many people, whatever. He used to say, "Derinka, stay in the car," and I did. This one time, I asked him, I said, "Papa, can't I go with you? I want to go with you." So he said, "Okay." And he took me and held my hand, and we went to the vegetable one. At that time, they had a lot of Oriental people working there. And all of a sudden, my dad stops at one of the booths, and he's talking to the Oriental man, and he's talking Chinese. And I looked up at him and I said, "Papa, you never told me you talked that language." He said, "Well," I said, where did you learn to do that?" He said, "When I was a prisoner in Manchuria." And he said, "And instead of the Japanese, the Chinese were there." And he said, "I learned to speak Chinese."
Wow.
My dad spoke several languages, actually. He spoke Russian. He
Polish?
spoke,
Polish?
yes, he spoke Polish. He spoke
Yiddish? Yiddish?
Yiddish, yes, and Hebrew, and there was another language.
Did he speak English?
Huh?
Did he speak English?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course. And then he became a citizen, and everything proper. He loved this country. And I don't know what else I can tell you.
Do you know the names of your father's parents?
What's that, Blake?
The names of your father's parents.
My father's parents. I guess his father was gone, but his mother, and he had 2 sisters, and he had, I believe he had, I don't know if he had a brother or not, but I know that he brought one of the sisters over here, the youngest sister, and she married a musician, a violinist, who taught violin, and he was such a mean person. She had 2 children, a daughter and a son, and this husband used to lock the food up, lock and key, and dole it out to her. He was such a nasty, mean man. And unfortunately, she passed away very young. She had these 2 children, they were small, and she died.
What was her name?
Huh?
Her name.
Her name was, I guess in English, maybe Sylvia, because in Jewish it was Sivya.
And do you know their parents' name? Your father's parents' names, the sisters.
You know, I did, but it wasn't mentioned very often, and I really don't remember. We did receive a snapshot from them. His mother, the father was already gone, but the mother and the children. Now, he used to send money. He wanted to bring his mother here also. And he'd send her money, and she would take that money and use it as a dowry for one of the girls and marry him off, get him married. And he sent it several times. But she never did come. She found other places to put that money. I don't think she really wanted to come to a foreign country all of a sudden at her age. She was not young. So that's so much for that. She passed away, and so naturally I never knew any of them, except knew what they looked like by this little snapshot.
You knew the children. You knew Sylvia's children, Aaron and Ruthie.
Yes.
You knew them.
Oh, yes, I should say. That's the one that was here. That was the,
You're not taking me.
yeah, that
Please
was
move back.
the sister he brought over. The boy was, his name was Aaron Bernthal, and of course later, and he was a teacher.
He was a
He also
musician.
played the violin
Mhm.
very well. And he changed his name to Alan Burns. That's how he was known. And
Yeah, go ahead.
and his sister's name was
Ruthie,
Rebecca,
Rebecca.
and she married a fellow by the name of Bill Barr, so she became,
Betty Barr.
yes, and Rebecca Barr, and she called herself, we called her Betty. That's what she was known by as far as we were concerned. Aaron passed away much too young. He got married a Denver girl, but they moved to Los Angeles, where he lived most of his life until he passed away. And he had 2 children. His son was a dentist, and his daughter, oh goodness, I don't remember what she did. You know, we kept in touch for a long time, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but we no longer corresponded. They, I guess, they got married and they had their own families and whatever.
We'll pause. Okay, we're back. I'd like to know a little bit more about your father, and I'm wondering how old he was when he met your mother.
How old he was when?
When he met your mother.
Oh, you know, I don't know that, but I'm quite sure it had to be young, because my sister Fanny, when they came over, I think was
12, I think.
she was 12.
I think she was 12, or maybe 10. And
No,
Leah
she was 12, because there was 8 years difference between her and Leah.
Oh, okay, right. So Leah was around 4 or 5, I know that.
Yes. And then Fanny was 8 years older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Fanny was 12.
Yes. I know my dad died young. His papers said he was, I think, 60. But we always thought he was 62. Why that is, I don't know. But I believe there was a reason at the time that we thought he was older than he was. My mother was 73. She lived 9 years longer than my dad. He died of cancer of the lung, which turns out to be a natural thing because he smoked himself to death. My dad used to do his bookwork at night, and he'd be sitting at his desk doing his books, and the cigarette on the top shelf of the desk, there was maybe 4 or 5 of them lit at the same time. One was a Russian cigarette, one was a Turkish cigarette, one was, and he was a habitual smoker. Always. I never remember my dad without a cigarette in his hands. And so naturally, that's what happened to him. My mother got leukemia, but I think that she would have lived longer than the 73 years because we had, at that time, we called the foremost hematologist in the world. That was, he was from Canada, but he was, he went to Salt Lake City's university, where he taught hematology and worked as a doctor there. And so we called him, and he said, we told him that we were told here by our doctor that my mom had leukemia, but we want someone that's knowledgeable about to look at her, and maybe there's something they can do for her. And so he said, yes, you pay my way and pay my hotel, whatever, I'll be happy to come. And he did. And he said that when they get it like that, when they're older, they last longer. It doesn't take them that fast. So naturally, we were thrilled at hearing that. But all of a sudden, she got pains, and the doctors here said that they didn't know what it was. So I took her back to Salt Lake to see him. And he said, after his examination, he said she had gallstones and they could remove the gallstones. And so I asked her if she wanted surgery at this point in her life. And she said, oh yes. She'd, that might give her some relief from the pain and give her a few more years. But she passed away there. And she never made it, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And she was 73 years old.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you at that time?
But my dad and mother, I don't know what I can tell you about them that isn't always something wonderful. They were such charitable people. My dad, he started, well, before he did this, he started something called, oh, that was a Hebrew name. That was, I knew it and I can't think of it now. But it was for transients who came, Jewish transients.
I'd like to ask you about.
Oh, my dad's charities and things.
Yeah, well, let's start before that with your dad and your mom, and how old they were when Fanny and Leah were born, and when your father went into the army. Was he already married when he went into the army? Did he already have children?
Oh, yes, and both children were born. They must have been, I guess, Fanny must have been a pretty big girl, because when he came home from the service, the neighbors all came running to my mother's house to tell my mother that my dad was coming home. And this is a funny thing. My sister Fanny told us that one of the neighbors threw a rock in my mother's window to tell her that Shmuel is coming home. Shmuel is coming home. Isn't that funny? They break a window for that. But, you know, that is ironic. But my sister Fanny said, she said, you can't imagine how handsome this man was. She said, my father was so handsome, I fell madly in love with him. And I know he must have been. The pictures we have of him now, he was sick already. He was already ill, so he doesn't look the same. But he died too young for sure, and so did my mother. They were such good people, they should have been able to live longer. They were doing good for everyone. During the Depression, they helped their neighbors. They, and my mother used to change and clean the sheets from this place where the trenches came, and my father used to bring the food, and they were just, my mother supported one of the rabbis who did not have a synagogue, Rabbi Shapiro, and she used to go. She had someone else clean her house, but she went and cleaned his house because he wouldn't let anybody in. No Gentile would come in his house. So they always did such wonderful things. My dad made what was called the West Colfax Loan Association. And he got friends that were in the neighborhood to go with him. And one of them, that was Mr. Klausner, who also had a store directly across from our delicatessen that my mother ran, incidentally. I don't know, I told you he was in the wholesale and retail. My mother ran the retail store. And the store, his name was was Klausner, Mr. Klausner, and they had everything, linens and clothing and shoes, one of those things. And he became the treasurer. And then there was Ben Heller, who was Dr. Heller's father. Let's see, his name, I'm trying to think of Dr. Heller's first name.
Usher.
No, his English name, he did the surgery on my knee.
No, that's not the same Hellers. Usher Heller is a urologist. Arnie Heller did the surgery on your knee.
So Arnie
Different
Heller,
Hellers.
that's who I'm talking about. Arnie Heller's father was secretary, and actually my dad was president. And then there was a Mr. Litbach, and I don't remember exactly what, I don't know what he did, but he had some kind of title. This was made so that they could help the refugee people who came without any money. They would loan them money to go in business or do whatever they needed. My dad signed for him. And 1/4 of the time, my father would have to pay. He signed for him, he paid for him. So now all this was done. So much wonderful charity things that my dad and mother both did. And they are not, unfortunately, they are not in the archives. I called the woman that runs that, what's her name, Cheryl?
Arkin.
Yes.
Sandy
Katie?
Arkin.
Huh?
Sandy Arkin.
Sandy Arkin. And so I called her and I told her, I said, everybody is in the archives, every little grocery, every little everything. My folks who did so much are not there. I don't understand that. And she said, well, we need proof. I said, I already gave you proof once. I said, their attorney for the West Colfax loan and my father's attorney was Ted Gelt's father.
Lou Gelt.
His name was Lou, yeah, Lou Gelt. And he had already spoken about all these things, but apparently he didn't put it down in paper, and I was too young, we all were, to get the proper things done to get it. And so she said, we need pictures. Do you have a picture of the delicatessen? Do you have this? Do you have that? I said, and I didn't know we did have, but since then, Rhoda sent me a picture of the delicatessen, my father sitting out front. I have all that now, and I think maybe Ted would remember. He was a young boy, but his father was the attorney for West Colfax Loan and for my dad. So it seems to me that he would know. Now, every now and then my dad would have young boys who were going to school would drive the truck for him. And this one young man is, thank goodness, is still here, but he has he has some kind of a,
He's on a kidney machine.
yes, is that what it is? So he has kidney problems, he's on, but he drove the truck for my dad when he was a very young boy at school. And so if, you know, if he would make a little note, write a little note for me to tell me, then I could give her that, I could give her the picture, and I'm going to have to do that rather soon. And maybe she'll do something about it this time.
Mm.
I hope so, because he deserves to be in the archives. If every little grocery store who did nothing for anybody except sell merchandise, my father was good to the world. Whoever needed him was there. All the bums that came through Denver, they must have had something that told them that they could come to our delicatessen and they could eat. My mother fed everyone.
Mm-hmm.
She would sit them down at a table in the store and feed them.
They
Never,
used to mark the
ever.
sidewalk, Mother.
Huh?
They used to actually mark the sidewalks.
Is that what?
They usually actually did
Well,
that.
we didn't know how it came about, but they were all there. And the gypsies used to come by, and they would steal us blind. They'd say to my mother, "I'll tell your fortune. I want to tell your fortune." And they'd make her get down under the counter and tell her fortune, and the other gypsies stole everything out of the store. But that wasn't all. This was another little incident, and I can tell it because it wasn't a secret. It was told to me. I was a very dear friend of Bernie and Little Halpern. And Bernie's brother Joe he had a pawn shop, I guess, way up on East Colfax. And he was not very young, and we were talking about my dad one day, and I said to him, "Did you know my father, Joe? You should have known my dad." And he said, "Of course." He said, "Don't you know I put Bernie through college when I stole off your father's truck?" Well, I said, "You're kidding, Joe." "Oh, no," he said, "I'm not. I'm telling the truth." Isn't that funny?
That's funny. I can't believe your mom fell for the gypsy's trick.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow, so that's, what else do you want to know?
How long was your father in the Army?
In the Army?
Yeah.
8 years.
Wow.
Long time.
Do you know, do you have any other information about what he did in the Army? You mentioned that he was in the band.
Well, he was in the band most of the time until the fighting became so severe that they needed a courier. So that's what they did. But I guess.
Did he tell you how he ended up in
Well, he
prison?
was a prisoner.
Right.
See, they got him at the front when he took this, whatever he was supposed to take to the front. They'd already had the others, so he was easy to get. And they put him in prison, of course, you know. And that's where he was for many years. You know, he had to be there a long time to learn to speak Chinese. And then he was in the Army itself. I don't know, they were fighting for, maybe they were fighting for 4 years or so, I don't know. That's something I never did. And that's an easy thing to find out by going back and looking into them. but I don't know for sure. But that's what happened there. And okay, what else?
Did Sam or Sarah, did either of them talk about their journey from Russia to Denver?
About his journey?
Yeah, or your mother's.
My mother, yes. My mother, naturally, they were down in, you know, in the steerage, whatever it's called. And naturally, she was terribly seasick. So that much I remember. And my sister Fanny, for the first time, ate a banana. And she didn't know what it was. She didn't know you have to peel it. but they learned fast. But it was not a good journey over, not where they were. And my dad didn't speak much about his at all, because my dad never complained about anything ever. So, I don't know. I think that even when he had this cancer, and his doctor here kept telling him that he was bringing up blood, and my mother was worried about it. What she thought was maybe he had tuberculosis, because she knew what that was because of her sister-in-law who had tuberculosis. But the doctor kept saying, no, it's not that. He's had pneumonia, and that's the aftermath of pneumonia. But it didn't go away, and it didn't stop. So they went to Mayo Brothers, and that's where they told him he had cancer of the lung. And they wanted to remove the lung. They wanted to operate. But I don't know, my mother was afraid it would kill him. She didn't realize